come to your mind when you think about clean data? Okay, after doing that little bit of exercise, now let's see 5 things that come to your mind about clean data. Now, looking at this data on my screen, what are the things that seem odd to you in this data? Or let me even ask, do you think you can go ahead to quickly analyze data with this data that we have? Can we quickly generate insight from this data? Or if I ask the question, I want to know the revenue for copier sales for 2015, how long do you think it would take me to generate this insight if I had hundreds of years? Probably I had years going back from 1900 to 2025. How long do you think it would get me to be able to generate this? Like, I'm sure for me to be able to do it, I have to look here. Okay, this 2015 copier sales. This come here again. Okay, this 2015 copier sales for Northeast. There's no clear labeling. I'm just going to go with a lot of assumption that this is talking about copier sales for 2015. There's no year labeling as well. And this probably talking about the various region. I don't know. Just coming up with assumptions at this point. Ugh, then look at this. Okay, look at various copier sales and have to sum them together. Now, it's important to know when you are working with data, it's important to have the data at the best possible way to be able to generate the most possible analysis that you can at the shortest bit of time. So, so when you're working with data, it's important to know having data for ML is slightly different from having data for regular analysis. There may be some additional features you want to do if you are going the data science route. You want to train models as well. There are some additional things you want to do, maybe various things, maybe changing some text to numbers or different things so that the machine will understand it. But when you're analyzing data as an analyst or as an engineer or analytic engineer as well, there are various ways your data should be presented for easy understanding. Now, there's a rule which I've been using for a couple of years. There's a popular blog about it. It's created in popular company Debra Consulting, came up with concept of 7 golden rules. I, in my own case scenarios of working with data as well, I've also added a bit on top of that and some additional things you need to know when you're working with data. But some of these rules which you typically think of clean data is clean data should not have empty rows, should not have empty columns, should have unique one row of heading, unique, all fields should have their own unique category. Fields should have unique category, no totals or subtotals in the data, not the report. I'll explain this a bit. Date must in a single column. And this doesn't mean that you can, when you have ship date, trade date, they should all be in the same column. No, what it means that each date should have its own column, single column. You shouldn't literally combine like maybe ship date, trade date in one column. Makes it a lot messy for analysis. They should have a single column, no obstructions around your data. Outliers should be carefully highlighted or defined based on data or business requirement. Now, I added this because I've noticed one other thing that is important to do. Your data may look perfect and clean, but you may still have outlier values which you may or may not have to treat. So it's something which I may say it could be like an A2. So you need to know what outliers are and how best to handle outliers. What empty rows talk about is now there's difference between empty rows and empty cell or empty values. It's possible for some reason, maybe it was probably not stated, the data was not retrieved, and all. It's possible that copier sale did not have or did not maybe at the point of time wasn't recorded their revenue for 2000. Now it's important to note before you go ahead to change empty values, you need to ask yourself some certain question. In this case, I'm addressing empty values, not empty rows. Empty rows should typically be removed from your data. You have no business with them. But for empty values or empty cells, is the value always going to be empty? Would replacing it affect the center of tendency, or I can just say the mean, affect the mean, median, m- mood, median standard deviation of the results or the population, whatever how you may have it, would have it. Is it important to be, is the entire field important in the analysis? So if the entire field is not important, there are some cases where you may filter them out. But But the key question you ask is the value always going to remain empty? If, for instance, you probably change the value to zero, and there are some cases where you can have copiers, maybe you can have the actual value as zero, that's they did not make any sales. It could be a case of, oh, maybe the value had not been updated and is going to be updated. If you change it to zero, it will be hard tracking that, oh, you made this change to zero, and you wouldn't know at the end of the day when it needs to be updated, it's going to be updated. So that's why it's always key to ask yourself, is it always going to remain empty? Now, is the field useful for analysis? It's important in your data, in your data, data, not your report. In your data, you could probably leave it there, but for your report, you can filter out all those your particular values. It depends on the business case scenario, the problem you are faced with, because this is something I've seen most of the time. People automatically come and replace it with the average. Now, why it's seen or you hear this in a lot of public videos and all is because sometimes is when you're dealing with machine learning, you need to actually deal with those values somehow. You have to, because machines don't understand those empty null space. So you have to actually give them a value, which then that could work. But when you're analyzing data, you can't just go about assigning values to anything which they may not be. So it's important to note that you have to know like what's the actual business case scenario for it. Sometimes assigning the average may not hurt, but general times you don't want to just go and assume or manipulate data for for you. So you have to be sure. So missing cells are different from missing empty rows. Empty rows, you are talking of the entire row. For example, maybe I do something like this with Excel. I just inserted an empty row. The entire row is empty. It's not doing anything to the analysis. It's empty. You can get rid of it as well. Now, the same thing goes for empty column. We're saying the entire column is empty, not the cell. You can get rid of it as well in your analysis. So those are the key points you need to note. Very, very useful. One row of heading. Now, one row of heading helps your data to be properly labeled. This data, we can see North Central at the top. We can see this here. It's a lot confusing to even understand what's going on. So you should have like a single row of heading that kind of like speaks to each field, that each columns talk about specific data that they have there. That allows your data neat and easy for analysis. Now, all fields should have unique category, which I listed. No totals or subtotals in your data. Now, this is a very, very important rule. Can be different between them leaving you in the company and them firing you. Now, what this means is in your data, we're not talking about your reports. Your report, you could have totals and subtotals. And I know there are some cases where some people's reports serve as data for another thing, which is valid. But I'm saying in your data, when you have huge load of calculation, when you are bringing your data in, it's important to let the reporting do whatever reporting tool you are using, maybe your Power BI, your Tableau, do hand do the calculation for those total themselves. But in your data, if you are not aware, or if the data is loaded in with those total and subtotal value and they are not properly related, it can lead to huge inflation of the numbers. And it could be the difference between 10 million and 10 billion, 10 billion or 20 billion when you have like a subtotal. Probably if there's a subtotal that subs maybe service plan for 2000 to 2005, I insert that subtotal here and still keep it at maybe 2005. But me, I know it's the subtotal of 2000 to 2005. If somebody is just analyzing the data, it will seem like, oh, the general years are much. So for you to properly analyze the data, get rid of those subtotals or total for your analysis, for your data cleaning step. Now, when you bring it to your report can have totals and subtotals because it's a general report. But when you're cleaning, working with your data, it's normally best to take those parts out and let parts that are calculation be kind of done in your reporting tool. Now, one other thing we have is dates must be in a single column. So dates, which I like today stated, I'm not saying you cannot have ship date, order date, transaction date, but each of those dates should be on its own column, not that they are all on a single row in a particular column called date. All those dates should have their own single column. Now, every unique category should have its header, so there should be a category name for this, which is called year, which is called year for this. Now, so that's important to note. Then outliers should be carefully highlighted, defined, or treated. Now, when we are talking of outliers, outlier doesn't automatically mean it's a bad thing. Outliers in general could mean it's okay. It's how I'll define outliers is a deviation from the normal expected values that you have. So let's say, for example, our revenue, the average of our revenue is probably 6 million, 8 million or so. Then you have one particular year that is like 100 million. Now that is an outlier value. It doesn't mean that that year value is wrong. You need to ask key question. In our business, do we always make 100 million? Is it a data issue? Is it a report issue? Is something needs to be addressed in that kind of case scenario? So handling outliers is key and important for your business as well. Now, so that's for outliers. For handling outliers in your data. Now, obstruction are things that are not useful for your data. Just take them out in your data. Now, looking at this data, one thing I can see is we have unique fields in this data. So let me just try to identify the unique fields before we go ahead to start cleaning. Now, I can see a field talking about region, the various region that we have. I can see a field talking about the probably I can call it maybe line of business or LOB for short. I can see a few talking about the year, then I can see the values that we have based on that data. Now, me thinking, how best can I rearrange this data to make sense, to be easy for analysis? So I'll be expecting to have 4 columns. 4 columns in the sense of I should be able to have maybe region based on those rules which I highlighted, LOB, year, and you have the values highlighted. So these are the 4 regions which I should be able to have or see at the end of the analytics or the analysis which I'm doing, at the end of the cleaning phase which I have done. So based on that, how can I go ahead to clean this? Now we're going to be cleaning this with Power Query. Remember in the previous video we highlighted Power Query is an ETL2 start transform load. And how we can do this is with few simple step in Power BI. So I'm going to go to Power BI, click on Get Data, and I'm going to specify where the data is located. The data is an Excel file, so I was going to specify Excel workbook. And after specifying is an Excel workbook, I just need to select the particular workbook that I'm interested in. So that is 30. Last, select this workbook. I'm going to click on open. The moment I've clicked on open, it should begin the Power Query. It should begin the Power Query interface for me, where I can go ahead to start the cleaning of the data. The moment you've clicked on the dirty data workbook, now you'll see the option to select the sheet. Now it's important to know when you're connecting to Power BI from an Excel, you have 2 options. Either you connect via the sheet name or the table. Now, most times, if your data is in a table, it's best you load it in a table because table is a more structured, cleaned format. Also, there's a named range. Now, how you differentiate it, the sheets, the icon will show just the white icon, but for tables, you see it in the blue icon. But for this demo, we're going to connect to the sheets. I'm going to just select the dirty sheet because I don't need to connect to the home sheet. It's not really doing anything for me. And I'm going to click on transform data. The moment I click on transform data, it should open the Power Query editor interface. So that's coming right up. And there I'll be able to edit, do some transformation based on the query. Now the various tabs in Power Query which were explained in the previous video. Now I'll be showing us how we can go ahead to make some little bit of transformation. Now by default, we brought the data into our Power Query. This is where you see the data in Power Query. Now if you see, Power Query kind of automatically tries to be smart and it applies two steps every time we bring a data in. It tries to promote headers and tries to change that. Now, it's not in all scenarios that this is a good thing. So it's always best, as much as possible, to take control of what you're doing in Power Query so that you can be able to edit or delete it. Now, source and navigation, when you select the source of where the document is and you select the particular sheet, those are these two steps, source and navigation. But this promoted and change type, since we're not the ones that did it, I can just click on this promoted headers, right click and click on delete till the end. Delete until end. So it will delete the step and the change type step. Am I sure I want to delete it? Yes. So our data is going to look something like this. Now, if you remember, we want a situation where we have four columns. We have our region, our market, our line of business, and we want our year, and we want our value. Now, for us to be able to do that, first of all, we can see the region, and I think this is the line of business as showing as rows, and we want them to be in a single column. A situation where you need to flip the data from rows to column or column to rows, vice versa, is you do something called transpose data. And I can come to the transform tab and click on transpose, or I can right click directly and under the transform and I can search for the transpose. But it's always a lot faster at the top. At the top here, you just click on transpose data. So it just transpose your data for you. So the moment I clicked on transpose data, now you can see our data is looking almost good to some extent. We have our region like this: north central, northeast, northwest, southeast, south, southwest. And this is talking of our line of business. So I want a situation where I'll be able to have, let me give this region and line of business the proper name. So I'm going to use first rows as headers. This will allow me to promote this null to the proper name. Now, if you see, anytime you do promote headers, Power Query automatically does a change type for you. Now, I normally advise it's best to delete this sometimes because you don't want Power Query to do it for you in between. It's best to probably do it at the end or when you are certified, so you don't have to start changing type at different scenarios. So I'm going to clear this. I don't need it now. Not like it's not good. I don't need it now. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, if you remember, in our rules of golden quality data, gold quality data, we said there should be no empty row. When we transpose our data, we observe that there are empty rows at the bottom here. Though there are no values, which I'm going to get to us fixing this out. But let's get rid of this entire empty row. So if you Just want to be sure. I'm just going to scroll to the right to sure that those rows are null to the end. So that entire last row is null. And for this, for me to get rid of this is I'll be doing it from column two. I'll explain why not column one. Is and I'm going to select this and I'm going to remove null. Remove null. The moment I click on remove null, click on OK. So that will filter out all that empty row that is at the bottom. Now, if I did it from column one, it would have filtered out all this null, null, null that we have here. But these values are not null technically. So if we look at the data a bit, we'll be able to see that this not central value for copier sales is talking about this copier sales for not central. So the same for not for this part, it should be talking about not central. This printer sales should be talking about not central. Service plan should be talking about not central. Now for Northeast, part should be talking about Northeast, printers should be talking about Northeast, and the rest like this. So we want a situation to be able to fill these values. In a case of all of this for we stop at North Central, the same for Northeast, it will be able to fill the values down. Uh down. And for us to do this, I can click on this column one, click on this drop down, and I can click on fill down. And what this will do is it's going to fill those values for me downwards. So we have north central, north central, north central, northeast, northeast, northwest, and vice versa. So if you see, these two columns are looking 100%, almost 100% good. So I'm going to rename these columns. By clicking inside of it, you can rename it. I'm going to call this region, and I'm going to call this, and I'm going to call this line of business. So by clicking inside or by clicking to rename, you can call it LOB. So that line of business. Now, if you see these two columns are 100% valid now. It showed 100% valid. And these two columns kind of conform to our rules of clean data. That's they have unique category, unique rules of heading. But if you see this 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, if you remember part of our rules, we said dates should be in a single column. The reason for that is for easy analysis and also to be able to do time-based calculations as well. Now, if this is just showing us the year value and the values for the year, but if this was probably date, month, and year, if we want to connect this to another date table that gives us more granularity based on the data, that tells us more about the month that the thing happened, the week, the type of week, and all, we won't be able to carry out that analysis with the data like this. We will still be able to carry out some insights with the data like this, but it shouldn't be at the best form. So we want a situation where this year and this value will become this year will become our rules, and the value also will become our rules. So we want a situation where we can transpose just this particular section. We're not transposing the entire data. No, we just want to be able to flip a specific section of our data from rows to column. And for us to do this, we use a function called onPivot. So what onPivot is doing again, like I'm saying, is yeah, kind of if you want to transpose the old data, you use transpose. But you if you just want to flip a specific section of your data, what you use is on pivot columns. And for this, I'm going to select the region and select the line of business, which is this LOB, and I'm going to right click and do unpivot other columns. Now, what this unpivot other columns will do is it will flip the years. So we'll be able to have that 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003 in a single column, and we will have another column introduced, which will be our values, like I stated here. So we have the years and the values stated like this. So that that's basically done. So you can see our data is showing valid for everything. The only other thing we need to do is rename this column. Maybe I want to call this year, and we would enforce the data type. Call this year. And now I'm going to make the data type for every single thing. So how do you change the data type? And if you remember in the previous video, what I said for why the data type is so important is for you to be able to properly group things into their proper fields. So if you are grouping a quantitative field or a categorical field, you may want to group it into its particular field so that its Power BI can be able to easily perform calculation based on it. Now, for example, this region and line of business, I may want to have them as text. So I'm going to click on the two to be able to do it fast and easy. Select, go to the column that you want to do it on. Select the region, for example, which is what I've done. Then select the line of business. Let's take. I'm going to select the region. Yeah, I can click on this ABC 1, 2, 3. Either way it works. And I can do, when I click on this ABC 1, 2, 3, I'll be able to select the type of the data that it is. So yeah, select on the region, select on the line of business, and right click, and I'm going to click on change type and specify this to be a text. Now this year, it, this, so I'll get to the year lastly. The values, I can click on this and change it to a decimal number, because why I'm changing this to a decimal, you can have it as whole number if you know you're largely going to be dealing with just single value like whole numbers. But if you are talking about money, money could have decimals and all. So you may want to have it as decimal number. You can also specify it as a currency as well. That's a fixed decimal number. You specify the currency type. But if you don't know the exact currency that you're dealing with yet, you can just have it as a decimal number. In Power BI itself, you can format it later on. So I'm going to specify this as a decimal number. Now this year, now year, these are talking about value. So I may want to typically change this to probably a whole number which probably best describe it. But dependent on your use case now, some use case now, if this year is serving as an ID pointing to another table and all, if in that other table is a text as well, and in this table is a text as well, it's also fine to have it as a text. but it's best you give things the proper category. If it was a proper date, I would have used the date data type. It's a number, so you could leave it as a number data type, but it's important to note when you need to do it for use it for categorical fields, you need to change it from summarization to no summarization to make sure Power BI is aware. You don't want to group this thing together. Now, the moment you're done with all this simple transformation and all, you can go to the advanced editor to see all you've done in the codes that were generated. But for this, I'm just going to come here before I close and apply. I'll call it new, new clean data. So the moment I'm done with this, I can now close and apply, and I have the data loaded in Power BI. I can now go on to start building report visualization based on that new and cleaned up data. So I'm looking forward to you guys doing the assignment and seeing how you guys result on the clean data will be. So if you have further questions to ask me on this data cleaning with Power Query, if you would like other videos on this, you can feel free to like and drop comment. If you want access to the data, you can also reach out as well. Okay. Thank you and see you in subsequent videos.